Good
morning, everyone, and welcome to the webinar, How to Convert LinkedIn Connections to Qualified Appointments. My name is Nathanial Bibby, and I'm the Managing Director of Bibby Consulting Group, and we're a LinkedIn marketing agency specialising in generating leads. And I'm fortunate to have with me today a business coach and sales coach I've known for several years now, David Guest. And the reason that I brought David Guest in to be involved in this webinar is he is an expert on sales conversion and process to convert leads into qualified appointments and eventually sales. So welcome, David.
Yeah, thanks, Nathaniel. Thanks very much for the opportunity. Now, look, as we get started, I might get everyone who's on the webinar just to type in yes or that you're there in the chat window, just to make sure that you're hearing us, because you know, technology, we just need to make sure it's all working. So if anyone who's out there can just start typing in yes in the chat window, that'd be great.
Okay, while you're doing that, I might just give you a little bit of an overview as why David is the guy that I chose to get involved. David's actually helped me with my own sales process and conversion, and I wouldn't be able to do this business unless I had one. He's been in the sales business for 23 years, and I guess he's seen a lot of changes over that time, but the principles still apply. And over 750,000 in business education, 15 years of actual coaching, and results that he's globally recognized as one of the top marketing coaches. So that picture there with Brad Sugar is when he won the Global Marketing Coach Award in 2012. So this isn't just Australia or Melbourne. This is a global winner of the Marketing Coach Award given by Action Coach Brad Sugar, CEO. I guess what I like personally about the way David does things is he practices what he preaches. When he first started his career, he started off earning 30K in a job. Well, by 7 years, that was 300K. Back in those days, that must be worth about equivalent of about 700 or 800K these days. Would that be right, David? Yeah.
I mean, I was looking at those figures before, and it doesn't look like much to some of the salespeople out there today. But at the time, it was considered to be quite astronomical. Now, it's an interesting number because people look at that and go, well, is that boasting? No. What it was is that when I started in sales, $30,000 was pretty much the bottom of the barrel, entry-level position. I was living in Oakley, and my first job was in Epping. So if anyone knows where Epping is from Oakley, it's an hour and a half's drive each way. I did it because it was the only place that would have me. And I also knew that sales was something that you can't learn unless you do it. So I took the job, and the beauty of having a 1.5 hour travel to and from work meant I had lots of time in the car, so I started listening to audiobooks. And what I realized is sales is one of my favorite areas for people to move into because you get paid directly in relation to your ability to sell. So the wage that you earn has nothing to do with how much someone's willing to pay you. It's got everything to do with your ability to convert a prospect into a client. So the only reason I got to this level in sales was purely through a relentless effort to educate myself over 7 years. I never stopped learning during that time. I've never stopped learning to this very day. Reading books. The reason I went into coaching is because I got a lot of questions from people as to, how do you do this and why have you been successful? What's your secret? And what I learned is the secret is hard work. But the hard work is actually building your own education. So I read 2 books every month now just to continue the education. It's not just sales, it's marketing, business, it's psychology. And we'll touch on a bit of that today.
Sure. Okay, so let's get straight into the content. What you're going to get from today, the 3 biggest mistakes people make, we're going to knock those on the head right away so that you don't make those. The 5-step formula to master social selling. And at the end, we're actually going to go into the word-for-word message scripts that we use to turn cold prospects into sales appointments. So that involves what we use on social media as well as how we convert those people.
And the last thing I added there is, when it comes to selling, a lot of people see themselves as pushy salespeople, or, if you get pushy salespeople, you see them as annoying pests. I'm going to talk about how we can become welcome guests in people's lives rather than annoying pests.
Excellent. Okay, let's get straight into it.
Yeah, look, so number 1, and this sounds like an obvious statement. This comes from Stephen Covey's 7 Habits, but, I think when it comes to sales, the biggest thing that I train people to do is what is your outcome? What is the end result you're aiming for? Now, it sounds obvious when people say, well, to make a sale. But my challenge is, if you haven't got a clear outcome for a meeting or for an email or for a conversation on the phone, chances are you're going to go in the wrong direction or get hijacked, or you're just going to get frustrated by the lack of understanding what your outcome is.
Yeah.
So it's about being purpose-driven. So beginning with an end in mind is really key, not just to obviously closing the sale, but also to any interaction or communication with someone along the sales process. What I wanted to touch on is that there's a bit of a contrast, and we are talking about social media. And look, I've been in sales for a long time, and what I've noticed is the actual sales process hasn't changed. What's changed is when we use what component of it. In the old school marketing and advertising world, we used to learn the 4 Ps. And the 4 Ps are product, price, place, and promotion. And if you think about what that is, anyone who's done any studies on marketing, this is about making sure you've got the right product and you're in front of the right people and that you're advertising. Now, that changed around 2007, and it's a sort of arbitrary number, 2007, but it's around the time where social media or internet became a preferred method for people to start getting self-educated on your product, your service, and actually seeking you out. Mm-hmm. So the new marketing rules are sort of simple, and we were just talking about this before the call, Nathaniel, and you were saying, you know, one of the things when we do actually use social media to generate leads and convert them into appointments is we really need to be seen not to be selling. We need to be seen to be serving. And serving means helping people get what they want. So instead of the 4 Ps, I look at the 4 Cs of marketing now. Now, the first one is content, and I think this word is a bit overused in internet marketing now. Because people say, well, what is content? Content means I get someone to write blogs for me or write articles for me. What I refer to as content is information that is beneficial to the person you're making contact with.
Yeah, just to add to that, when the shift changed towards social media, I think one of the big components that we need to recognize is that it's not actually the business that's defining who their brand is anymore. It's now in the hands of the customers, because the businesses that all thrive are the ones that have outstanding feedback from their customers and clients and do a good job, whereas the ones that don't are just going to eventually become extinct.
Yeah, so this whole notion of content is really about making sure that we're providing a lot of information to people up front, that we can starting a conversation that's meaningful, and it's not really just about pitching us. It's about understanding them. Look, the second C is context, and this is quite interesting, because another thing that the internet has allowed us to do is to catch people at certain times in the sales cycle or in the buying cycle, depending which way you're looking at it. So context means providing the right information at the right time. Okay, and I think the power of having a good CRM or the power of having social networks means that we can actually work out where people are at in the buying cycle and make sure that we're approaching them with the right information for that.
So just on that, David, what would be an example of using context to your advantage in the sales, social selling?
Yeah. Okay. So context in social selling. If we look at, for example, LinkedIn, which is what we're talking about today, LinkedIn is one of the most powerful sales tools that I've seen. And the reason I say that is it gives us this window into people's lives. We can see who they're connected to. We can see what groups they're a member of. We can see what's going on in their business world. And based on that, we can actually decide what it is that's relevant to them right now.
Yeah.
Now you think about cold calling in the old days, you would actually call someone and you'd interrupt their day. And you wouldn't know what they were doing, what they were thinking, or anything about them, and your job was to get as much knowledge about where they were at that point in time as possible.
Yes. So
here we are with LinkedIn, where I can actually find out information about you before I even make contact. So I can come to you in context of where you are right now. And it might be that you've just joined a group, or it might be that you've just posed a question. So we've got this ability to transparently look into the background of where people are at and provide relevant information to them right at this point in time.
Yeah. Excellent. Okay.
So look, the third one here is connection, and this ties in perfectly with what we're talking about. And what I mean about this one, Nathaniel, is that if we go back 10 years ago when I was doing sales training, we used to have this philosophy that we would teach, is that every person has a network, and that network is about 200 people that they know. And if you could get into that network through referrals, you could actually now multiply your connections out. What social media has done is added a couple of zeros to this, okay? Because people don't have one social network; they generally have half a dozen. So they got their Facebook, they got their LinkedIn, they've got their actual group of friends, they've got their social network at work, they might be part of a football team or something. So these connections, we have access to these, and we can build into these connections through these networks.
So what you're saying, David, is social media has actually given us more visibility over people's networks.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So what it means is also that we can have lots of conversations with lots of people simultaneously. We can actually connect faster. We don't have to make a phone call to see how people are going. We can look on their Facebook site, and some people don't like Facebook, some people love it. The thing I love about it most is I can track all my friends and family as to what's going on in their lives. So when I do catch up with someone, it's not like, tell me about what's been going on. It's like, congratulations on the new grandson. Oh, those photos look awesome. How was the trip to Bali? So I'm actually having a deeper understanding of where they're at.
Yeah.
So these connections mean we can track everyone who's important to us quite easily from our desktop.
And in the context of getting referrals and sales, one of the things that I found really cool is on LinkedIn, you can see who you've got in common as connections. Sometimes you can see all of somebody's LinkedIn connections.
Yeah.
And the awesome thing is, if you're going to visit a client, you can say, well, would you mind introducing me to this guy and this guy, this guy, because they'd be perfect introductions for me, rather than having to say, hey, have you got anyone that you could refer me to?
And I think it's mandatory, and this is a change in mindset for salespeople, is when I'm talking to someone on the phone now, I am on their LinkedIn page as I'm talking to them. Because I can now see what their hobbies are, I can see what they're interested in, I can see all sorts of different things that give me a bit of depth to the conversation. So the connections are stronger. Okay, so it's not really that we have more connections that are weak, it means that we have the ability to connect at a deeper level with the people that we're making contact with. And the last one here is also really important, and this is about community. Now, you think about what community means. In the traditional terms, it means a group. Okay, now in the old days, we would be part of a car club, or we might be part of a user group or an association. Now, associations are really struggling these days because they've been replaced with groups on LinkedIn, groups on Facebook. People are getting their community through online sources. I can find out anything about anything through communities online. What I'm suggesting here is that we, as salespeople, need to be part of these communities.
Yeah, and one of the things that a lot of people will go out and do who haven't got a lot of experience on LinkedIn is they'll create a group.
Yeah.
And it is really a big commitment to start a group. And what a much easier way I recommend you do it and go about it is to find existing groups and find existing conversations that are going on to engage with.
Yeah. Yeah, and this is key. And as we get into the specifics in the later part of this webinar, I know that we're going to be talking about exactly what to do to get the leads moving on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
Because I can see a lot of frustration with some people where they go, we've tried LinkedIn and it doesn't work for us, or even worse, they've joined that LinkedIn. What's it called when you have the executive?
They have the premium products, sales navigator, all that kind of stuff.
And they say we're a member of that. And to me, that's fantastic. But the question is, are you utilizing it? Are you getting into communities? Are you getting connections? Are you getting into context and providing the right content?
Yeah.
The old days of sales used to be cold calling, right? And this is a big distinction. And I think this is the epiphany I had around LinkedIn. See, cold calling means outbound calling, hitting people up, interrupting their day to try and sell them something. This is the old whacking bushes philosophy of sales. The more bushes you whack, the more sales you can make. What we've got now is this opportunity to actually get an insight into a person before we contact them. So we don't interrupt them until we have a valid knowledge of who they are, what drives them, and what's important to them. Then we can provide relevant content like candles that lead a path to our door.
Yeah.
So the whole thing on social selling, what we call it, is really changing the paradigm. Instead of going out there and pushing and closing and pushing and closing, what we're looking for is find our target market, do the research on the individual, go in there with relevant content that actually gets them interested. So finding out how we can help them first before we ask them to buy from us.
Yeah, and while we're on this bit, the network that you have on LinkedIn really defines how well it's going to work for you. So it's not like if you're messaging your connections, don't forget that they made a decision at some point to be involved in your network. And even if you're looking at people in your second connections, you do have somebody in common that you know. So it's not like you're just calling anyone out of a phone book. They are people that are within your sphere.
Yep. So that's sort of the key here, right? Is making sure that we've got that ability to keep that connection moving as well. So, look, the next thing I really wanted to talk about is, really the contrast between old and new selling. Now, anyone who's been in sales for a while, you'll read any sales book and they'll talk about there's 3 stages in a sales process. The first one is that you need to build rapport. The rapport is just about making sure that there's some sort of commonality so that that I can have a conversation with someone because I feel that there's a connection. The second part is the selling itself. And this is usually where we go into the pitching mode. Now, after we sell, we either close a sale or we don't. But if we don't close a sale, there's generally follow-up. Now, you'll notice I've got a diamond on the left and an hourglass on the right. So the old style of selling would be very opportunistic. And what it meant is we didn't spend a lot of time in rapport.
Well, I remember walking into sales appointments back in the day, looking around for something that I could see that was in common, maybe like a footy team picture up on the wall or whatever it was. And these days, obviously, we can do it so much easier, can't we?
Exactly. So what used to happen is we'd go into this sales call and the pressure was on, right? You had an hour to impress them and to get them to make a decision. And if they didn't make a decision on the day, follow-up was futile. There was no point in doing any follow-up. So that style of selling, and people relate this to things like used cars, where there's a lot of pressure because you're walking in to buy the car today, you either buy it or you buy it somewhere else. What we're finding social media is doing is pushing more the hourglass side of this, which is, there's a long process of rapport building where people are checking you out, doing the research, building the relationship, looking for value. The sale actually is almost no pressure at all because they're buying from you because you're actually providing something they need. And if they're not buying at that point in time, the follow-up is automatic. They're connecting with you. They're staying part of the groups that you're part of. They're in your database. They're seeing articles that you're writing. They're seeing testimonials from other clients.
And one of the misconceptions is because it's an hourglass, is that it's a longer sales cycle. But what people forget sometimes is most of that is actually happening online. It's actually 70% of the sales process happens before you even sit down with the client. So you can systemize and automate a lot of this.
Yeah. So the rapport building and the follow-up is mostly done online. And now the problem is it doesn't do itself. Right? And anyone who's had automated robots send them emails and follow-ups, you get to a point where you go, well, this is really just generic stuff. What we need to do is utilize these tools to supplement our sales process, not to replace it. And this is one of the keys that we're going to be sort of digging right into today. So we talked about the 5 steps to social selling, and I just wanted to run through this fairly quickly, Nathaniel, to give people a framework so they sort of get where we're going now. The first thing with social selling is obviously getting people to know you. Right? Now, one of the things, and Robert Kiyosaki probably said it best, he said the richest people in the world are looking for and building networks because everyone else is looking for work. Okay? And what I took away from that is that your network is the new way that we value people. It's how many people you're connected to. Your network is your net worth.
Equality. Yeah.
Quality. So when we're looking for people to connect to on LinkedIn, for example, I'm looking at how many connections they have. Because that's like an asset, right? And when I see they've got 3,000 connections, I go, this is a guy that's worth connecting to.
Well, yeah, there's this big herd mentality online. If anyone's ever seen a headline on LinkedIn with the word lion written in it in big capital letters, if you want to know what that stands for, it's LinkedIn Open Networker, and what it means is I'll accept anyone's connection request, whether they're based, wherever they're based in the world. And now there's these groups on LinkedIn where if you join them, you could probably get 3,000 or 4,000 people connect with you overnight, but the quality of them is going to be extremely low. You're going to get bombarded with spam. So it's really important that the network's going to be worthwhile. And when you're thinking about when you get a connection request, right, you're obviously deciding whether or not it's worth connecting. Ask yourself the quick question: is this person likely to have someone within their network that would be worthwhile doing business with?
That's right. So the network, it's not just about the size, it's about the quality. And so if you think about your network as an asset, and when people are evaluating whether to connect with you, one of their questions is, well, who are the people you know? Because the people you know are going to determine whether it's worth connecting. And the second statement here is it's not even who you know anymore, it's who knows you. And I think who you know is about spruiking who you are. Who knows you is about people referring you or saying you need to connect to someone.
Is that one of your clients there, is it, David?
Yes, definitely. Definitely. Yes, that's one of my clients. I've been talking to her lately. But, we won't go into that. That's Miley Cyrus, Wrecking Ball. And
that's the one.
The reason I used her as an example is because Miley Cyrus was not, like the way that she got popular is to do things that were out there. Right? So what happened is it wasn't who she knew that got her famous, it's what she did. And what she did is she went on television and did some extreme style videos, if anyone remembers Wrecking Ball, and it went viral. And it went viral because she was right out there on the edge. Now, if anyone remembers where Miley Cyrus came from, she was in Disney, right? So she is actually one of the singers and dancers in the Disney show. But she wanted to break the paradigm, so she went out there and made herself known.
Okay, this is a really important part, because what I hear in the marketplace a lot is when I ask people why they do things a certain way, like why have you got your headline written that way, why are you describing your job title that way, they often say, well, that's what everyone else does.
Yeah.
And really on social media, if that's the way you're looking at things, you're not going to have a lot of success. You really need to stand out from the crowd and do something a little bit different and have that brand represented in all of your marketing and even your sales process, so that people know there's a personality and the brand stands for something.
Exactly. So the point is, how do you stand out? And how do you get people to talk about you? And it can be things like comedy. It can be things like being unique. What it can't be is the same as everyone else. So copying other people's ways of doing things is becoming a follower, not a leader. Okay, and even though some people don't like Miley Cyrus, what I will suggest is she took some initiative and she stood out. And so she became famous because of these sorts of things. Now, once people get to know you, right, and really like knows in the real world is about how different you are. The next thing is like. Now, we can use the Facebook like, the big thumbs up, but what I'm talking about here is how do we build this relationship? Now, if anyone's like, by the way, sales. If you haven't done sales training and you're a business owner, you're giving away a lot of money. Okay? Because what happens is everyone who's in business is in sales. And the way I'll prove it is if you're married, chances are you're in sales, right? If you're not married, chances are you're also in sales, right? And so what happens is sales, in my mind, is your ability to communicate your point to another human being. So let's put it this way. If you communicate with people, you're in sales. And if you haven't learnt how to do it, you're actually losing sales along the way. So this particular slide, we're going to be talking about what's called the stadium pitch. Now, it comes from a fellow by the name of Chet Holmes. He wrote a book called The Ultimate Sales Machine. In there, he talks about, he says, just imagine we have the MCG booked out, 100,000 people are in there, and they're all your target market. Now, they have to come to this presentation, but they don't have to stay. So you now have 100,000 people sitting in an audience, and you have the opportunity to pitch. Now, if you stand up in front of 100,000 people and say, hi, my name is David Guest, and I'm a business coach, what will happen is about 90% of that room are going to stand up and walk out the room because they're going to go, I don't want a business coach. So he talks about this stadium pitch, and he says the ironic part of that is if you do stand up in a room of 100,000 people who are in your target market and you say what you do, a certain percentage of people will be saying, oh, thank God you're here. I was actually looking for an insurance salesperson, or I was looking for this. And so 3% of the target market are buying now. Anyone who's done cold calling knows this is about right. Cold calling means I call 100 people, I'll get 3% of people saying, oh, I'm glad you called because we're actually in the market for an accountant or whatever.
I think that's high these days.
It is, right, because people are becoming immune. So what we also know is that there's another 7% that are actually not in buying mode right now, but they're open to it, which means these are the people that we actually get excited about because they're leads, right? But actually they're further than leads. These are actually what we call prospects. They've shown interest, right? And so we take care of this 10% through our sales process because we're excited they're in the buying mode, so they've got high buyer intent. But there's another 90% of people that are actually in one of three categories. The first one is they're not thinking about it. So you've interrupted their day with your pitch, but they're just not even, it's not even crossing their mind. It's the last thing on their mind. There's another 30% that actually believe they've thought about it, but they think they're not interested. And then there's the last 30% that basically either have engaged someone that does what you do and they're happy with their current situation.
This is really interesting because one of the things that you have to be mindful of on social media is people are only interested in two things. First is themselves. Like, do you think it's possible people have egos? It's a question I often ask. And then the second thing is, so the first thing is what do they know, right? And the second thing is what do they know they want to know? Because if you go in there trying to tell them what they want to know, you won't get anywhere. It's not until you sit down and have start asking questions in a face-to-face meeting or even in a telephone conversation that you can even broach the idea of something they haven't thought about.
So I suppose the reason I put this up is when we connect on LinkedIn with people, generally speaking, very few of those people that we're connecting with are in buying mode. Right? Because we're connecting with them, it's outbound. And so we're actually initiating a conversation. We don't know where they are in this pyramid. Some people will be actually rapt that you've contacted them because they're actually looking, but the majority of people are sort of not really sure why you're contacting them, or they're not in the market, and so they're going to shut you down pretty quickly if you try and pitch. So with a stadium pitch, we start with a headline, and if our headline is about what we do, we're going to lose 90% of the people. So we actually need to think in terms of what do they want. Okay, and I'm not talking about what do they want from me as a salesperson, what do they want in general? It's a harder question. Right? So if you think about your target market and you don't know what makes them tick, what keeps them awake at night, what's the sort of thing they all want, you're going to be challenged with keeping people in this stadium. So it's a different approach, okay? And what I'm getting at here is my initial contact with someone on LinkedIn, I shouldn't be pitching my product. I should be looking to how I can help them, okay? And if I can look at as to how I can help them, then chances are they will engage in a conversation with me.
Yeah, and we will share with you an exact script that we used on a campaign towards the end of the call, so make sure you hang around for that.
Yeah. So then we move into trust. Now, trust is a really sort of interesting thing. It's a bit like a glass. It's hard to, once it's broken, it's really hard to get it back. But we've got to build trust over a bit of time. Now, there's a couple of ways to do that. One is through credibility. This is where your profile on LinkedIn needs to be targeting your target market. They need to look at your profile and say, do I want to connect with this person? Exactly what you said before, Nathaniel. They're looking at you saying, what value are you going to add to me? So your credibility of your profile is key. Now, the other thing I just wanted to throw in here is a thing called social proof. Now, some people are skeptical about testimonials and so forth, but let me suggest to you that people who are looking to build a business relationship with you, they have no point of reference other than what you show them and what they can search out. So be really wary about what comes up when people type your name into Google. Social proof is awesome because what it is, it's not you telling someone how good you are, it's actually someone who's used your services, so it's third-party credentials.
Yeah, and this, by the way, is the main reason why social media became popular in the first place, because we all heard our friends were on Facebook, and so eventually we caved and we decided to join as well. So if you master this concept, you'll do extremely well on social selling.
Yeah, so it's absolutely critical that people who are using the social networks to market have social proof online. Now, this can be in the form of testimonials. In LinkedIn, they're called
recommendations.
Recommendations, right. In Google, they're called reviews. Videos work best. Second best is using the channels that we spoke about through what they offer. But make sure it's there because trust is critical for people to move to that next stage. So after trust, now we can enter into a conversation, and this is another area I think a lot of people in sales need to develop skills. When we talk about need, I'm not talking about your need as a salesperson. I'm talking about their need as a prospect. Now, everyone's needs will be different but also the same. And what I mean by that is it's not whether I know and second guess what your need is as a prospective client. It's whether I understand what your need is and I can now provide a solution to that. I always talk about the secret weapon of the problem solver, the salesperson, and its questions. And I will challenge any salesperson out there. You must have a series of somewhere between 5 and 10 good questions that you can ask a prospect. And it's not, do you want to buy? We're talking about questions that uncover needs. That's why it's called a needs analysis, right?
Can you give us an example of one, David?
Well, there's obvious ones here, Nathaniel, and there's open-ended questions like, tell me about what's frustrating you about generating leads in your business right now. There's less obvious ones. I like these sorts of questions. Can you tell me the story? Like just say it's Acme, the company. Can you tell me a bit of background about Acme? What is your competitive advantage in the marketplace? What is it about your clients that you're looking for?
Yeah.
So we're asking what we would call open questions to start off with to get a bit of a picture. Now, a couple of reasons I want to ask questions of someone. Number one is to obviously get the answers, but number two is to actually work out how they think. Okay, because as a sales rep, the best thing I can do is understand my client, understand their needs, and then approach them with a solution to what they interpret their needs to be.
As a general rule, whether it's social media or on the telephone or even in a face-to-face meeting, you've got to be thinking to yourself as a salesperson, how do I get them talking more than me right away?
Yeah, exactly.
And you do that through questions, obviously.
Yeah, and there's a difference between an open and a closed question, and I won't go into the details here, but if you do any sales training, they'll explain to you. An open question is one that elicits a broad answer or verbose answer or a story. A closed question is specific, like, how many clients do you have, or, things that are really like numbers driven. So in the start of a conversation, the questions need to be open. Okay? So what we need to do is just make sure that people are aware that questions are the secret weapon of a salesperson, because they get the other person talking. The beauty of this is I can have my prospects doing the selling for me. So instead of saying, let me tell you all about my company and how good we are and all the products we sell, I actually ask the prospect, why are you looking at insurance right now? Why is that important to you? What are the benefits that you're looking to get from our product or service?
And I must ask a question at this point, David.
Yes.
Where in the sales process do you start asking questions like that?
So going back to what we've talked about, we've got our know, like, trust. So if we zoom right in on a sales call, okay, and I'm trying to keep this in context of LinkedIn, it's not very good to ask questions in your initial connection request. Okay, it's premature. We haven't built the trust relationship yet. So where I would place this is, generally speaking, when we talk about sales process, which we'll touch on very shortly, it would be in the coffee meeting. So our initial face-to-face or telephone chat that we have with someone.
Yep.
And we'll start with some sort of broader questions just to get the interaction going. But the second reason I'm asking questions is to qualify.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is, as a sales rep, I don't want to invest a lot of time selling to someone who's not in the market. I want to actually find out from them where they are in their buying cycle, whether they fit my target market, whether they have budget, and all these sorts of questions before I go into writing proposals. Okay, so probably in that initial meeting, either on the phone or face-to-face. Secondly, once we actually go into presentation mode, I am still big on asking questions until I know exactly what drives my client.
Great.
Okay? Once we've got those questions sorted, then we can move into solution mode. Now, most people go straight to solution mode. The number of emails I get on LinkedIn from people saying, "Hi, David, I thought we could connect. Let me tell you all about my company and all the fantastic products and services we offer. And if you have any needs for these, please let me know."
How many people have received that one?
It's infinite. It just astounds me to this very day. Or, they put in some throwaway lines like, "We've worked with lots of people like you," and then they still put the solution in there. Now, no one's actually had any conversation or thrown any questions at me, and what it means is I don't feel any trust, I don't feel any rapport with that person, and they're just trying to pitch their product. Now, that will work for the 3% that are buying right now, but going back to the stadium pitch, I've got 97% that need some convincing that I'm the guy to deal with, or that they even need my product in the first place. So that solution really doesn't come in, you'll notice, until 5 steps in.
Yeah, and LinkedIn is not a sales website. It's a social networking place. Right. It's a bit like a networking function.
Yeah.
And you're just part of that. You're just a social citizen. You're establishing yourself as an authority in the room, and you're generating discussions. And some of those discussions are going to lead into opportunities. And if you're active, a lot of there's going to be a lot of discussions. So it can work extremely well.
Yeah. Now, I will point out, just to the listeners, we're going to take questions at the last part of this webinar. So if you want to start pumping them into the chat session, we'll get to those as we can towards the end. So, look, you're right. And what you just said is really important. People forget social media is not pitching. Social media is social. So we've got to start looking at this metaphor of what it is and how to act in a social environment. Because if you go to a party or a networking event and you start tapping on people's shoulders and going, "Hey, let me tell you about my fantastic insurance company," and all that, straight away they shut down. What we're doing is we're connecting with people. We're building rapport. And the reason I showed you those 6 steps there was because often we overlook the know, like, trust component, and we go straight to even questions, or even worse, straight to solution.
Yeah. So a connection request and a connection accept is a little bit like exchanging business cards.
Yeah. Or even earlier than that in a lot of cases, it's like, "Hi, how you going?" So you go to a networking event and someone might introduce you. That's even a warm lead, but sometimes you just do a straight up, "Hey, I noticed that you're standing near the coffee machine and I'm about to get a coffee." Yeah,
and I've always learned about sales touch points.
Yeah.
And if you're going to a networking event and you connect with somebody afterwards and you send them a quick message, all of these things that you're doing are touch points, just reminding them who you are. And the chances of them remembering you over the other person that they spent, twice as much time talking to at the event is a lot higher.
Yeah, and one of the things around networking is I often speak to people about how to work a room, how to go to a networking event, and the truth of the matter is you can't generally sell at a networking event. What you can do is make connections. And so the objective is to make sure that you meet as many people as possible, you trade business cards with as many people as possible, you take those contact details away with maybe a little bit of information, and then you do your sales outside of the event. Now, the same is true with LinkedIn. We talk about LinkedIn as a social network. The objective here is to make the connections, get the communication happening, and then what we can do is from there, we can now take that person offline and speak to them on a phone, catch up for a coffee, and go through our normal sales process.
Okay, now one of the big mistakes people make, right, is they end up having a lot of coffees and they don't get any business. Now, how do we qualify people at a networking event or on social media in a way that doesn't ask questions about buying? Because if you think about it, like if you're looking for somebody that's worth, like a high net worth individual, if you're a financial planner, for example, I guess one of the questions you could ask a business owner is, well, how many staff have you got in your business? Because they're only going to be, there's going to be caps on how much money they're making based on how many employees they have. Yeah. Maybe. It's just an idea. Are there any other tips you have around that, David?
100%. Going back to the very first slide I put up, which is beginning with an end in mind. See, when you make a connection with someone on LinkedIn, you've got to think, what is the end of this component of the sales process? Now, I talk about sales blueprint here, and I'll go into this in a couple of ways. A sales process is a flowchart. Now, that connection is just a step in a sequence of events that's going to occur. My question is, what do I expect as an outcome of that connection? Now, in simple terms, some people go, well, to make a sale or to get a qualified lead. To me, that's 3 steps down the track. What am I looking for in the connection? I'm looking for a response. Okay? I want someone to email me back when I put my connection request in saying, great to be introduced to you, or thanks for making contact. Yes, I'd love to have a quick chat, or yes, I'd love to connect. Okay. Now, I've just had success in that step. So the question is, what is the next step? Now, as you're aware, the next step is to get them to a coffee. Now, coffee is not the goal, right? Coffee is just a step. So what's the outcome of going up to a coffee with someone? Now, I can say close the sale, but that's premature as well, right? The outcome of the coffee is qualification. So the coffee conversation must be scripted, and you need to have the questions there, and you need to ask questions that help you determine whether this person's in your target market and ready to buy. So there's 2 parts to creating a sales process. One is the flow chart, and the second thing is artifacts. Now, it's a funny word, artifacts, because people think about little spears like that. But what I mean by artifacts is actual documents. Now, process means flowchart. Artifacts means things like templated emails or sales scripts or a presentation folder. It's something that you use as part of your engagement. Okay?
So these are the tools we're getting into now.
Yeah, these are the tools. So often when people have these coffee appointments, they go, well, I got 20 coffee appointments and I got nothing out of it. I've heard this so many times. I say, great, what was your intention out of the coffee appointments? Well, to get a sale or to get a lead. Okay, so what was your process? Well, I went to see them for coffee and asked them if they're interested in buying my product. And I'm thinking to myself, well, where's your qualification in that?
This is a massive problem we find that when we generate leads on LinkedIn for our clients, is that's what happens when they get to the sales meeting, it all falls apart. And we always ask the question, well, were the leads good quality? And they'll say, oh, no, that guy wasn't interested, that guy wasn't interested, that guy wasn't interested. And what they're doing is they're making the responsibility not theirs, because in actual fact, when you ask the question, were they in the right demographic, did they have a need, were they the decision maker, the answer is yes all the time. So it's actually not a lead problem, it's a sales conversion problem.
Excellent. So look, when we talk about conversion, I'm talking about each step converting to the next step. So if I have a coffee with someone, what's a realistic outcome? Now, to me, a realistic outcome is simple. I ask 5 questions and I get the answers to those questions. I can do that in a coffee. Now, based on those questions, I can decide whether I'm going to do a proposal, put this guy on hold for a while, make contact with him later, or connect through to someone else. So I might have 3 or 4 or 5 outcomes from that meeting. But my question is, who's measuring that? Okay, because if there's 5 different outcomes, the right answer to how'd you go with the 20 coffees is, well, out of the 20 coffees, I got 20 people to give me a profile. Out of those profiles, 5 of them turned into contact in 3 months, 5 of them put me onto someone else, and 5 of them said, send me a quote.
Yeah. And
So,
if times are good and you are making sales, it's even more reason to measure because you need to be capitalising on it.
yeah,
And if you're getting a 10% conversion rate and it's going really well,
yeah,
imagine what could happen if you changed it to 20% just by tweaking a few things.
yeah. And so what happens here is that the ideal purpose of any interaction with someone is to focus on the prospect and not you. Because if you focus on them and finding out whether they have a need for your service, you're going to have a much better chance of engagement.
You're just giving away the secret to social media marketing. It's not about you.
Oh, we're going to save that to the end, but now it's over. We have to come up with something else. I think it's that script. You know, you did mention you're going to give people word for word what they need to write in that connection email.
I am indeed, yep.
So let's keep that one up our sleeve till later. Sales process. So let's quickly go through. This is an example of a typical sales process. And it's not rocket science, but I want to go through it so we understand how it fits. Imagine you have an incoming inquiry or a lead. We go through qualifying, that's asking questions, and based on that, we'll either decide to book an appointment or not. Now, booking an appointment is decided based on qualifying. Now, you'll notice I've got a few extra steps in here. Send out info, confirm info received, 24-hour call appointment presentation. Now, there's a lot of steps in there. Now, the reason we did that is because the more touch points I have with someone, the more trust they have in me. Because people are making assessments of your organisation based on a couple of things. The first thing is how you act with them in the sales process. So to have a totally structured sales process will give people a sense of you being a totally structured organisation. Now, the missing link here is where does LinkedIn fit into this sales process?
Well, and is it also possible that different businesses will have different sales processes?
Yeah, every business needs to build one of these themselves, and this is key. If you don't have a flowchart that outlines your sales process, you're giving away money. You're losing clients. And I'd suggest, and one of the things I'll talk about towards the end is how to do this, okay, for your business. Now, most people got the ebook that actually takes you through the basis of doing this. If you haven't got the ebook, you can click the link, download it. It takes you through this process.
So the sales process might change, but the most important thing is that you actually have one, because a lot of people will say, well, my business is different. We just, you know, it's just whether people need it or not.
That's right.
And there's no excuses for not having this down packed, and we'll avoid a lot of costly errors.
Yeah. And what it does, it allows us to measure the right things.
Yeah.
Because I think one of the mistakes you mentioned is people are counting coffees as a number. But my concern is coffees is neither here nor there. Where does it fit in the process? Because coffees have to convert to something else. Now, to me, a coffee would sort of be the qualifier. Okay? So let's take a step backwards and say, well, where does LinkedIn fit in here? This process is from incoming inquiry.
Yeah, well, if we're going to talk about lead generation, that's exactly where it comes in. LinkedIn can be used for a number of things, but lead generation is going to fill your funnel. And if you don't get all these other steps right afterwards, then it's not going to do much for you.
Yeah, and the other thing I'll point out is with LinkedIn leads or any leads from social media, how quickly you respond to them. Timing is everything.
Yeah, I actually did, when I found out about this, I didn't think that it was such a big deal. I thought, well, if you reply to today or tomorrow, does it really make too much of a difference? So I did some research, and sure enough, like as soon as you reply to a message on LinkedIn the next day, the chances of them actually doing business with you is like 60 or 70% lower than if you reply immediately. It's phenomenal.
Because here's the thing, right? When people are online and they do a connection, like not a connection, you're on a website and you say, I want information or I want someone to contact me, what's your expectation? So for me, my expectation is now. Contact me now. Now, it might be 3 a.m. in the morning. I still have this thing in my mind that you need to contact me now or first thing in the morning because I'm in your shop now. I'm on your website now. So I think the same applies with LinkedIn. If someone shows interest in connecting with you, you need to be chatting now. Okay, there needs to be some live stuff going on. So where it fits into this flowchart is that it's actually before. It's before. It's sort of like incoming inquiry means one step further than a connection request.
Okay. So I bet everyone's really waiting to see what we have to send to people on LinkedIn to get them to commit to that.
So just to quickly wrap up, what are artifacts? They're things like sales scripts. I believe every part of your sales process must be scripted. You must have brochures and email templates prepared in advance. Testimonials we've talked about at length. Videos is a big one. With online, you've got to have some videos of your clients doing testimony, of yourself actually presenting components of what you're what you're selling, because it gives people a sense of you.
So what's one of the easy ways, if we don't have any of this stuff, for people listening about getting started with all of this sales scripts and artifacts, etc., what do you think they should start with first?
The first thing they need to do is put a process in place. So basically a flow chart that outlines every step. If there's less than 7 steps, it's too short. Sometimes 3 steps will occur in one transaction. So you might have a meeting with someone where you've got, the qualification questions, you've got the solution discussion, and then you've got an outcome that can go 3 ways. So the first thing is to do the flow chart. The second thing is to make sure that you've got sales scripts. Now, you shouldn't be reading a sales script when you're talking to someone, but you should be rehearsing it. So you think about a peak performing athlete. They don't jump into the grand final and say, so what are the rules for penalties in this game? They're learning all of their things about rules beforehand. Yep.
And I guess this comes down to speaking in language which connects with the buyer's frustration, as opposed to just the product, because a lot of business owners, you'd come across this all the time, David, if business isn't great, they think it's a product problem. They focus on the product,
That's right.
and never think to ask the customer what they want.
Yeah. So the other driver behind sales scripts, just from what you said, is that your customer or prospect will derail you. They'll take you down the path they want to go down, but if you don't have your intention scripted, chances are you'll just get hijacked and you'll run out of time. You won't get to do your pitch at the end, whatever it might be, because you're not scripted. Scripts need to include things like how to handle objections, right? I know, like, for example, a lot of people get hit with price objections. When's the best time to handle that?
That's a big one, isn't it?
Yeah. See, price objections aren't price objections, they're value objections. But you throw a price at someone, they go, oh, you're way more expensive than your competitor. Of course I am, because I provide a different service. Oh, yeah, but to me they look the same. So I like to handle price objections in my...
We got before Christmas. Oh, it's just Christmas, at the time of the year.
Yeah.
But that's not at all. They just, if they don't see the value, they're going to make up the easiest excuse there is. And price is an easy one. Christmas is an easy one. Whatever it is, the chances of them coming around and saying, oh, I can't see the value in this is pretty low, because they don't want to get into one of those situations where you can't, get the other person off the telephone.
Yeah. So interestingly enough, what happens here is objections need to be handled in your sales process, right? You don't want them to come up. You want them to be dealt with before they come up. So if you're expensive, you need to be explaining why you're expensive in your sales process. I won't go into scripts today. We could spend another hour or 2 on scripts, but what I'm suggesting is start. Now, if you don't know where to start, jump on my website and you can download a sales scripts guide or the sales process guide. The other thing you can do is just Google it. There's a million resources available, but it's about investing the time in building this. So, look, the last thing is obviously your sales presentation and how you do it. Now, I know that I'm conscious of time. I wanted you to talk specifically about the success that you've had on LinkedIn.
Okay. Well, first and foremost, we've had a lot of success with lead generation on LinkedIn, and lead generation is only as good as the sales process that a business has. So I'll bring up this particular success story, which is Lick Media. Christian, who's a good friend of mine, who's a client. We generated over 100 leads, and if you hop on YouTube, you'll see the testimonial that they gave us. But over 100 leads is one thing. We've done this for a couple of businesses that also didn't actually get any increase in revenue because they weren't followed up correctly. But for Lick Media, they actually doubled their sales revenue with these leads, because they had a system and a process in place to convert those leads into appointments and eventually into sales.
Yeah, and this is pretty key, because people get excited by leads. But to me, leads is just a part of the equation. What I'm excited about here is doubling revenue in 30 days.
Oh, I'd much rather have 50 leads and a higher conversion rate.
Exactly. So often people invest the money in sales and marketing, and we had this chat earlier. I've met people who are spending between $5,000 and $15,000 a month on lead generation.
Jeez.
But when we ask them to do sales training with their team, they go, how much is that? And I say, well, that's $5,000. They go, that sounds expensive. I'm saying, hang on, you're spending $15,000 a month. And that $15,000 vanishes at the end of the month. If I train my sales team for $5,000, how long does that investment last me?
And they'll go down the road and pay somebody who's just started sales training $500 instead.
Exactly. And so it's really about conversion. And what we're talking about today is these leads are coming in from LinkedIn. They're early leads. They're low-level leads. They don't have high buyer intent. We need a process to make sure we can take them from being interested in having a conversation to actually becoming a prospect.
I threw this up there as well because one of the things that I'm going to offer everyone on the call, there's actually no sales pitch at the end of this call, by the way. We're just giving away some meetings next Friday. If anyone wants to get like a LinkedIn profile optimization review, this is a sort of results you can expect. This is Lily Monroe, who worked for me for about 6 months or so, who had a profile. You can see she had 0, 0, 0 views, and then all of a sudden, June the 1st, when we optimized the profile, within a week, she got 232 profile views, and that was 91 in the last day of record there. Yeah. It's top 3% of the people in her network and most visible. A lot of people get hung up on this. They say, well, she's beautiful. Yeah. But these are the sort of results that we see across the board. Yep. All our clients are good looking, obviously. This is Ashwin Reddy, a financial advisor who we did a trial with recently. It's
pretty good looking as well, right?
Yes, absolutely. And look, the LinkedIn profile does come across as very credible. And within 30 days, he was in the top 4% yep. out of the connections, and he's generated about 24 leads in the last 30 days from that, and that's also on YouTube.
Yeah, fantastic. Really, there's a lot of people out there that are using LinkedIn to generate leads. The distinction, and I think this is what got me excited about what you're doing, Nathaniel, is you're using it as an outbound marketing tool. It almost replaces cold calling because it allows us to make contact with people, do some research on those people before we make contact, create the connection, generate basically an initial appointment or conversation, and take them through our sales process in a really simple way that we can do offline. Like, we don't even need to be, well, it's online, but it doesn't need to be during office hours. We can do a lot of this work outsourced.
That's right, and I put up a snapshot of some of our clients because I guess there's this myth out there that this is the sort of small business methodology, when really the most interest that we're getting is right from the top of the chain. You know, people like True Value Solar, BT Financial Group, ASX-listed companies are contacting us wanting LinkedIn training or LinkedIn lead generation systems put in place for their business. Yeah. And it comes down to the methodology, and we're not. If we were selling on LinkedIn, these guys wouldn't go anywhere near it because it would harm their reputation. Yeah. All we're doing is giving a quick nudge to their prospects so that they generate some interest and then funnel them into their sales systems. These guys all have sales systems. There's not one of them that doesn't. So if you don't have one, you really need to get one in order to make social media a success for your business. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's simple. It's a flowchart. It's a process. It's some scripting. It's some pre-written emails. Now, I know you've been promising people that you're going to talk about how they do that initial contact, because I get a lot of contact requests from LinkedIn, as you mentioned. I don't know about other people. The first thing I do is I click on the person's name, I look at their profile. The next thing I do is I say, is this person going to be useful to me as a business owner? So do they know other people that I need to connect with, or are they just going to try and sell me something that I'm not interested in?
Okay, all right. Well, let's get straight into it then, because I've got there's a number of strategies, but I'm going to talk about one that's extremely easy. If you've got a target market that you'd like to connect with, go out there and find a LinkedIn group that your target market may be a member of, and then what happens is when you join that group, you're actually going to get visibility of everyone that's in that group, whereas you wouldn't before because they're not part of your network. Now, in the group, you can normally actually message them directly without even being connected with them.
Right. So what you're suggesting is find a target market. And let's say my target market is entrepreneurs. So I go into the groups area of LinkedIn, I typed in the word entrepreneurs, and I find as many entrepreneur groups as I can, yeah?
Yeah, well, as you know, David, I've run the Entrepreneur Club Australia and New Zealand group on LinkedIn. Yeah. And that's the example that I'm going to use. Okay. So in that scenario, the script that I would suggest that you use, I would say, hello, let's say the guy's called John. Hi, John. We are both members of the Entrepreneur Club, Australia and New Zealand. Right,
so there's some commonality there.
So first step is, why? Why have you contacted me? I don't know you. We've established relevance. The next step would be, I've had a look at your LinkedIn profile, and I'm interested in learning a little bit more about what you do at XYZ.
Okay, so this is specificity. So it's just not a generic email. It's an email from someone who's actually looking at my profile.
And who am I interested in, me or them?
Yeah. So you basically, and I get an email coming in that says, this is how I got your details from this group. And the second part is, I'm interested in talking to you about your company. Or I've read through your profile, and I believe I can help your company, or whatever it might be within there. Yep.
And so, call to action.
Yep.
Would you be free to have a bit more of a chat about this? Tuesday morning or Wednesday afternoon?
Okay. So once again, sales technique, we're using what's called an alternative choice there. So we're actually asking the person to take the next step and give me a preferred time to make contact. By giving them a choice of two, it's not a yes/no answer. It's actually Tuesday or Wednesday afternoon. Now, if I receive an email like that, it's easy to respond to because I tend to look at this guy. I go, okay, I met him through this group. He's got something of interest to me, or he wants to find out more about what I do. I would probably even go further than that and suggest that there's an old saying that there's one radio station that everybody listens to. It's WIIFM. It stands for What's in It for Me. Now, whenever I look to make contact with someone, I want to answer the question, what's in it for them? Yep. And if I can think of how I can help them, they'll probably respond with a positive answer. It's
like if you're going to create business partnerships with somebody, you don't go in and say, oh, I'd just like to have your client base so that I can sell more. You actually say the opposite, don't you? I've got clients that I would like to refer to you.
Yeah.
And that's how you generate the engagement.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people get hung up because they don't actually have the referrals sitting there already when they don't even have the business partner yet.
Yeah. Exactly. So sort of like the script you go there is brilliant because it's very effective, it's very direct, it's very personable, and it gives people an alternative choice. Now, if I do those and I set a target of doing 10 or 20 of those per day, I'm going to start generating some activity. Now, when someone says Tuesday morning to me, my next step is to go, okay, what am I going to do in that meeting? How am I going to add value, and what is my measurable outcome of that coffee conversation or whatever you call that? So it's very simple, but what it is, it's a mindset shift because people are looking at LinkedIn as a thing where I can look at resumes or a thing where I can, make connections, and you hope by making a connection someone's going to want to buy your product. I mean, that's not very realistic. Sales requires effort from you. You as in doing some research on the person you're talking to and then actually making contact and following up and making sure that you're proceeding through a process. So look, I just wanted to finish up on one last slide. One of my favourite business philosophers, Jim Rohn, passed away about 6 years ago, but I learnt this saying when I was young. When I first started in sales, first thing that I listened to was one of Jim Rohn's tapes at the time. They used to have audio cassettes then. And the one thing he said that stuck with me forever was never wish life were easier, wish that you were better. Because we've got these technologies coming and going all the time, Nathaniel, and I think, we just need to adapt our style and we need to be proactive when we get out there. So if we develop our own personal skills, we can improve our sales, we can improve our conversion, and that will improve our lives in general.
Yeah, and a lot of the stuff we're talking about is not really about LinkedIn. Let's be honest. I mean, this is about sales. And if all of a sudden, next year door knocking becomes more effective, we're all going to be out on the street. But in the meantime, this is the tool that is the most effective, and you really just have to learn how to use it to communicate effectively.
Yeah. Now, look, as we draw to an end, there's a couple of questions, and I know we've got a couple of minutes, so we'll go pretty quickly. Look, the first one was. How or when do we close the sale then? I mean, so obviously we make these contacts with people, and this question was how or when do we close the sale? Really good question. Nathaniel.
Oh, well, how or when do we close the sale? Well, look, I guess it's different for every industry, and if you've got your sales process lined out and it's a telephone call, an appointment, and it's a 2-appointment sales process, then the answer is you do it in the second appointment.
Yeah.
The wrong thing to do is to do it on the phone call because you're going to sell yourself short. Right. If somebody says to me, okay, no, I just want to buy that, I would say, well, why? Well, you obviously got a reason for saying that. Do you mind if I ask what it is?
Yeah.
Because you need to make sure that you're helping the person. Otherwise, they're only going to be a client for so long, and you may not even scratch the surface on what the opportunity is really worth.
Yeah. I'll take it one step further. When you close the sale is when the client is ready to buy. Now, we have to get them ready. Our job as salespeople is to get them to the point where they see value in what we do. So our job is not to close the sale. Our job is to actually get the client ready to buy.
So it's just like one long checklist. You've got really LinkedIn connection, you've got generating an opportunity, phone call, you've got your meeting, you've got a need recognition, you've got all the qualifying questions, and at the end of it, you can ask for the order, and not until you've checked off all those things along the way can you actually do that.
Yeah. Look, now, I'm conscious of time, and I know that you're offering people on the call some assistance. Do you want to just give us a bit of an outline as to what that is?
Yep. What I'm going to do is do a quick review of your LinkedIn profile. We can either do it over the phone. If anybody wants to do a face-to-face, I've got Friday next week free. I'm travelling either side of that, so it's the only day I can do.
Okay.
So essentially, you'll walk away with at least 3 really key things that you can do to get that sort of traction that we just went through with those examples there, and get in the top of your network. And then I've asked David if he wouldn't mind anyone who's interested in getting some advice on their sales systems to also offer a free phone call. So if either of you, if anyone along the call wants to take us up on that, the best thing to do is is it okay if we email?
Yep, so they can either email myself or email you. Look, my time's a bit tight at the moment, but if people email their interest, we'll arrange a time to have that chat. I will help people on the call with their sales process, okay? So what I need is to arrange a time that we can do that, and I'm happy to go through and help them fill in the blanks.
Sure, okay. So we'll send out the email address that you need to contact afterwards.
Yeah.
Otherwise, feel free to hop on either of our websites, davidguest.com.au, bibbyconsultinggroup.com.au. Thanks, everyone, for coming along, and we shall see you in the near future, no doubt.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity, Nathaniel, too. I hope the guys got value out of today.
Oh, I'm sure they did. Thank you.
Cheers.